We should move up a little bit.
We should move up a little bit. All right. But then they can't see the background.
They can
Because we got good stuff in the background, everyone.
Construction fails.
Oh. Funny videos.
You know what's gonna happen, right?
Oh!
Oh!
Well,
Oops.
oh wait, what's this one now?
Oh
What's
no.
he doing? Got muscles.
I'm like, can they see it?
Is he doing ballet?
He's doing some sort of gymnastics, something or other.
So we have construction fails on. And
Might be more interesting than Wine Wednesday today.
Yeah.
Than our topic.
Yeah.
Maybe.
As we
Although I don't know how that could be. Because, you know,
talking about
we're pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Gotta say. What's everybody doing? How's everyone on Wednesday? This dreary, dreary Wednesday.
Nasty Wednesday.
The snow.
Nasty Wednesday.
snow and it's icing.
Is it?
Yeah, I went for a run this morning and it was
No,
icy.
I just no.
Yeah.
Oh
That's
shit.
no bueno.
Alright.
So, we have a Riesling in our glasses today.
Yeah, should you Wayne has the bottle.
Oh, I did. I moved it.
So yesterday we went to
Sorry,
a
everybody.
winery. Wyandotte Winery.
Yes. In
Wayne, you
Gehanna.
I'm
Here,
gonna
I
get-
got it.
Yeah, I get. Oh, wait.
Excuse my reach behind you. Don't
Sorry.
back up too quick.
All right, here we go.
So this Wyandotte Winery is where we were
And
for an installment of a very, very interesting
series.
series.
What's your video series called?
Going local.
Going local.
Yes.
Hashtag going
Goodness.
local.
Hashtag going local.
Hashtag
So
going local.
we may
Yeah.
have visited
Hey, Robert.
Wyandotte Winery.
Yeah, so wait a few weeks and you'll watch the video for that. I've got to do a little
Yeah.
editing and so forth.
Ooh.
But yeah, good wine. So
Gonna
if
be
you're in the
fancy.
Gehanna area and
Mhm.
looking for a cool little venue, they've got food and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
But you have to watch Going Local to find out.
Yeah, you'll find out more
We're not going to spill the beans.
Yeah.
next week.
We're not going to give away the farm during Wine Wednesday.
No, heck no. So, all right, well, cheers.
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 We made it to another Wednesday. And you've made it along with us for the
Mhm.
ride. So what are we talking about today, girls?
Inspections.
Mm-hmm. And if you should have an inspection before you list your house or
As a buyer,
as a buyer.
should you do an inspection? Because here in Ohio, they're not required.
Yeah.
I do recommend them.
Highly recommend.
Highly, highly recommend it. But would you recommend for a seller?
I think that if they felt there was a lot of issues with their house.
Yeah.
It's
Like
just-
an older house?
Mhm.
Yeah.
I recommend for sellers.
Really?
I do, yeah, I do.
All of them?
Yeah, I do because I just feel like the inspection process sometimes brings up surprises that, you know, and quite honestly, if there's repair that needs to be done, if something comes up, and you can offer it to the buyer, which we have. Look, you know, here
Right.
is a little, you know, if you want to take a look at what this was
Right.
uncovered now. That's not to say every inspector, I think, finds different things.
Right.
Would you
Absolutely.
say in your experience?
Mhm.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I usually do recommend.
I had one file out of contract 2 times, so we had 3 inspections. And each report
Came back with something.
something
Something
different.
different, yeah.
So, you know, mentioned completely different things.
Yeah.
You know, so that's one of the things we're going to talk about to do are common issues that come up and
Mhm.
when you should be really worried and
Mhm.
sometimes when, you know, it can be worked with. You know?
Yeah, I do, because I do think too that sometimes, depending on the personality of the inspector too, it can make some things that maybe aren't as big of a deal
Yes.
Scary.
earth-shattering and scary, and
So-
sometimes not so much.
A way for, I think, buyers to really have like an ease of mind as they go to their inspection. So always recommend going
Yeah.
to the inspection, just so you can talk to the inspector and then they can help you understand like, hey, is this really, because when you're reading it on paper, I'm like,
Yeah, it sounds
Yeah.
like the walls are falling in.
right, but
Yeah.
it's really like, oh, you don't worry about that crack or something.
Right.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. Some of the stuff is just going to boil down to home ownership or
Mhm.
the home settling. You know, oh, I lost my thought. I don't know. I was thinking like sometimes older HVAC systems, older
Mhm.
things in a home, they can make it seem like you've got to get that replaced right now, and
Right.
you don't.
Right.
I mean,
Because
yeah.
what happens is they say that it's, you know, it's at the end of its life, but if it's still functioning, you can't really ask for a new furnace.
Well,
It's
you
kind
can.
of like saying,
you can, but probably not again.
it's kind of like saying the average life expectancy for a human is 75.
Right.
So at 75, we're just going to put you down.
You out.
So, I think it's the same, if you take good care of
Right,
your
it's-
HVAC and you've
right.
maintained it and
Mhm.
things are functioning
Yearly
well,
clean.
they can last long
Oh my
past what
gosh,
they
they
say.
used to last forever. I know, well, we just recently replaced our furnace in my personal home, but, the home was built, I think in the 80s.
Yeah, and I think they
Like
say 15 years, I think, is what the expected
Yeah.
life for a furnace or an air
Oh.
conditioner. Is that what it is?
I thought
don't
it was
know.
20.
Maybe
but-
15,
It could
20
be,
years,
yeah.
somewhere in that span.
The other thing is, and not every agent does this, but when I'm writing offers for my buyers, I always ask for a home warranty. And for my listings, I always suggest they have the home warranty in
Right.
place. Because if you are purchasing an older home or selling an older home and you don't have those newer systems in place, that covers
Right.
that. I mean, that's a
And I know that
great
the
feature.
home warranties, they will cover the sellers and the buyers.
Yes.
Right, yes,
So-
yes, the one that I typically.
Yeah.
Which is good. So when you list your house, if you list and you're going to just offer it, or if you go into contract and they ask for it, buy it right away, or put the order in for it right away. You don't have to pay for it until closing.
Right.
And then once you have put it in place, the seller's covered as well. So if something comes up in the inspection, I've had issues that have come up that's covered by
Right.
the home warranty.
Right.
So, but if you wait to put it in place, and then you're kind of
Yeah, no,
out
they
of
won't.
luck.
They won't.
So,
There's timing with that too. You
but
can't
do it
get
right.
the-
Do it sooner rather than later.
Yeah, from day one,
Yeah.
usually.
Oh, Mitchell said, I did not have a home inspection on my first home purchase, and of course we found mold after we moved in. I always tell the story to borrowers who say they may not get an inspection.
Yeah, so
So-
mold though too, I mean, that's one of those, would you, because there are some things that are extra coming up. Now, I would be curious where the mold was and how you found it. Was it underneath, like flooring, underneath the wall? Because that wouldn't have come up in a typical inspection anyway.
But usually, home inspectors are looking for visual
Signs.
signs.
Sure.
So-
Attics,
But
I
then they
had that
have-
happening.
Yeah. Then they have the extra test that you can do to actually test for mold.
Right.
And see
so-
what kind of
And
mold.
see what kind of,
Mhm.
right.
And what you have to do to get rid of it and all that stuff.
One of the quirky things I find here, and I'm sure it's everywhere, but I know in most of the homes that I've been writing offers on of a certain age, things that weren't code then, specifically venting from bathrooms going outside of the roof.
Yeah.
You're gonna find mold issues
Yeah.
or staining, or sometimes not, but depending on how vented. But yeah, okay, you're getting a call.
That's a fairly common finding. I think the vent fan in the bathroom, and a lot of people think the vent fan's for smells. It's for
Moisture.
moisture
Yeah.
to get the moisture out.
Which is really interesting to me that they didn't have the wherewithal to vent always out of the. I mean, what?
a lot of times I see it in half baths, like where a half bath has no vent,
Yeah.
which I can see. I don't
Because you're
necessarily.
not showering.
Right, I don't
Right.
see a moisture. I mean, the disclaimer for all of this is we're not home
We're not
inspectors or
inspectors,
experts.
builders, or experts.
But I don't see how moisture in a half bathroom with no
I
fan.
know. I'm like, are any home inspectors watching?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
don't really
call
see
it-
the giant issue there. However, that is something that commonly, especially for older homes, that will come up. Like someone put a half bath. Like for instance, I used to own a home where there was once a closet that was turned into a water closet. I mean, there was a toilet and a small sink, so it became a half bath. Well, it was never vented to the outside, and I never saw a problem.
No,
I think
and-
it's just for like smells.
What's it? Well, it is. And
And
what's
that one was off the
interesting-
kitchen, so.
What's interesting to me is that inspections that my buyers have had, the inspectors will call that out and say there's no vent in there. And then you bring in,
A
the
contractor.
expert
Yeah.
who on it, and they're like, no, you absolutely do not need
Yeah.
venting in a half bath. So, I don't know.
One of the most common ones I see is for older homes. You know, the inspector will comment the outlets aren't grounded.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in the days those homes were built, they were two-pronged, and they, like the three-pronged outlets
Yeah.
are for the ground. So when they built those homes, no, it wasn't grounded.
Mm-hmm.
And so to ground that house can be a very big expense.
Rewiring.
And you know, I've had electricians say this house wasn't built for that. You know,
Yeah,
so
I've
it's
seen
not.
that in the
yeah.
report, and it's
Yeah.
just usually just around the kitchen that they have.
Right. Well, the
Sure,
GFCI
sure.
outlets, obviously, you know,
Mhm.
and that's very common as well. If you don't, a GFCI outlet is the one with the buttons. You know, so like if it gets wet, like within I think it's supposed to be 3 feet
Yeah.
of a water source, you know, like a sink or a
Mhm.
washer dryer or something like that. There has to be a GFC protection, so that if it gets wet, then it just shuts down.
Shut that down.
Shut it down. So that's common, and that's not as I've been in my experience, not as big of a deal to
Mhm.
correct as to ground every outlet in the house.
Yeah.
Right. It's just a couple outlets and an
Right.
electrician coming in. And,
My electrician said when I showed him the inspection report and said, you know, they commented the outlets need to be grounded. He said, well, then tell them to go buy a new house.
Oh.
And that came from the electrician. So
Yeah.
he said because this house isn't built like that. And you know,
That's
his point was, you know, if you want a house with all grounded outlets, buy a newer house. You know,
Well,
like this isn't. It's not going to be that.
That's very valid, and I know I find that with asbestos too. Like in areas here in Central Ohio that have these 100-year-old plus homes, Upper Arlington specifically, I'm thinking of. There will still be asbestos wrapping the pipes. Now, asbestos is not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, it is a flame retardant. It had a purpose, but when it starts to fall apart is when there's
Yes.
issues, or if it's ripped or something.
when you disturb it, when it becomes airborne.
Yeah, and so that can always get a very
Mhm.
sticky too. But or lead paint too is going to be something in older homes.
If your house was built before '78, it's in there.
It's in there, and so you really have to, you know, if that's going to be a concern. Again, a newer home is probably what you want, not
I've
the.
actually never had anybody test for lead paint.
Never.
Oh no! Well, we
You
had.
can tell lead paint when you see it.
Um,
You know, like when it starts to crack and crease, the pattern that it forms when it starts to crack is very obvious.
Really?
Like it's very obvious. So like just Google like lead paint like
Cracking?
pictures like or cracking.
I'll do it right now.
do home inspectors look for lead paint, or do you have to do a special test?
I think it's just
it's the same the visual sign.
Yeah.
You know,
Okay.
like now to find out and say for sure it's lead paint, you got to send it to a lab and have it tested to say have a definitive.
where I ran into it being a
Yes,
problem
just like
is,
that.
and I'll show y'all what this looks like. It was a house in Gahanna, and it
That's
wasn't necessarily older. It was, but it was in that lead paint thing. The outside eaves were cracked and peeling and painted. Now, I'm sure the house had been painted since. It probably was not a lead paint issue, but the appraisal wouldn't pass
Right.
because it could have been. So then they come out. So my client ended up being the one to hire a painter to come and scrape and paint. And then the paint droppings were in the ground. The appraiser came out and said that all has to be cleaned up. They still wouldn't pass it.
No, I mean that is a legit concern. So
Yes.
if someone, you know, children in particular, maybe some really weird adults, eat it,
I have heard
You will
it tastes
get-
sweet.
and that's the allure, right? Like
Yeah,
kid,
it
like,
tastes good.
and then they like it will cause brain damage. So I mean, it is a legit concern.
So this is the picture.
yeah,
keep
that's
track,
a
I'll
good one. Yeah.
So you all can see what lead paint cracking looks like.
So should we tell like the different types of inspections?
Can you even
Yeah,
see
let's
it?
talk about that.
A whole
There.
house inspection,
Yes.
There.
radon.
Radon.
Let Jenny show this.
Hang
and
on,
then-
lead paint first.
Okay,
That's what it looks like.
and so that is
There.
that's not a separate test.
It is,
It
and they
is.
actually in the contract or in
They
the
signed
lead
it. I know
disclosure,
they,
yeah.
they signed that they have 10
Look, I
days
shut down your phone.
to do it.
I didn't even touch it. It just shut down. I don't know what's happening.
Frozen.
there. Frozen. Frozen.
Oh, there
there
you
it is. Oh, I broke
And
that.
So the lead paint, while we're on lead paint real quick, so if a house was built before 78, the seller has to provide a lead-based paint disclosure.
Yeah.
I've never seen one where anybody says, I know there's lead-based paint.
Mm-hmm.
However, again, if the house was built before 78, there's lead-based paint. You know, it's just a matter, it's probably been painted so many times since 1978.
It's all covered up.
It's encapsulated now, which is what you want. Like, you don't want it peeling, you don't want to see it obvious. The places where I see it most frequently, and exactly what Jenny just showed you, are in windowsills, like where it's an old home that still has the original windows,
Yeah.
and they painted it. And I was in a CE class, and they said that that's the number one source for lead poisoning is people raising and lowering the windows over and over. It creates a fine dust, and dust gets in the air, and then you ingest it. So,
Interesting.
so
don't lick the windows.
don't lick
open
it.
them.
I mean, you can open
Or
them,
close them.
but
taste
it's a good idea
Put a mask on.
to have, you know, if you have that, and especially if you have children. I mean, in all seriousness,
Mm-hmm.
I will be the first to tell you, people freak out over inspections over
Yes.
some ridiculous things, and or what I personally view as ridiculous. You know, and again, this comes from someone that sees these things all the time. So when you see
Right.
the 30-page report, I get it. People freak out. But lead-based paint, if you have kids, is not something to mess around with. Get it taken care of. If it's in, like, you know, if it's anywhere accessible. If you're getting an FHA loan, they're not going to let you, if they
Buy
see
it.
it peeling, you know, anywhere, outside, inside, windows, whatever, they're not going to let you. So if your inspector will note it, and again, just like the picture Jenny showed you, it's pretty obvious
Yeah,
if
that
it's
does look
lead-based
a lot
paint.
different than just peeling.
Peeling paint like these days, you know, looks much different than that paint.
Yeah.
So in any case, I think suffice it to say, and in your disclosure that the seller provides, it asks if you want this 10-day window for lead test, which I never really understood, because like, can you not, per the contract in your inspection period, if you check no in that box, does that mean you can't test for lead? I've never really understood that. Do you?
I think.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
I always just check it yes.
Yeah,
Or-
I mean, why check
Yeah.
no? I mean, why
Right.
check no? I mean,
And then what happens if your inspection period is 12 days, but this is saying 10 days?
yeah. It's a conflict. So, you know, my advice is, I think, like you said, is to check the box.
Mm-hmm.
Whether or not you decide you want to do it, talk to your inspector, talk to
Err on
qualified
the
people,
safe side rather
Yeah.
than.
and
Right.
find your level of
Have the
comfort.
option.
If you want to test for it, test for it. I've never had anybody test, and part of the reason is once you test for it, you're going to forever have to disclose that you know
Yeah.
it's there, which, again, if it was built for 78, we all know it's there.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know why you would spend the money to test for it when it's fairly obvious if it is or if it isn't. And then, so you spend the extra money, then you forever have to disclose it. And then if you, like, literally go through the abatement, like, where you have to abate it and not just encapsulate it, very expensive. So,
Yeah, sometimes the remedies are worse than
so this is an issue I think you talk to qualified person to get your level of comfort
experts.
and decide what you're going to do.
Yeah, mainly if that's going to be an issue for you, don't
Right.
purchase a home of that age.
Well, and I
That would be an
had a
issue.
client that recently looked at a house and was an FHA buyer, and the house clearly on every window had peeling lead-based paint. But in the agent marks, it said that the seller didn't have any money to make repairs. Well, my buyer was an FHA buyer, so I'm like, look, you can't buy this house because if they don't have money to make the repairs,
It's going to fall on you. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
and I would never pay for a repair before you close because
Right.
you know things happen. So, anyways, but that's one of the inspections. So you know, Amanda brought up. Let's talk about the different kinds of inspections. So lead-based is one of. And what are the other inspections?
Well, like you mentioned radon. That's a
Radon.
huge hot button
Mm-hmm.
right now.
And most,
Mold.
yeah. Let's talk about radon for a second. So
Okay.
radon's a odorless, colorless gas.
Yes.
Comes in through the foundation and usually below grade.
Right.
It comes up from, and it's in Ohio, very prevalent. So it's the number 2 leading cause of cancer. The EPA says it has to be 4 epicuries per liter or less, or it's too much. So you can install these systems, they put them in, and it sucks the gas out and it lowers that.
Blows it out into the air you're breathing outside.
I know.
I don't understand.
already-
Well, just don't go put your
It's
mouth.
in there,
Don't
like-
go put your mouth on that.
time, but what I've come to learn is that they will also test single stories on a slab and
Yeah.
bi-level homes that will also test positive for
Yeah.
radon. So
And it's still possible to mitigate.
yeah,
It's
they
difficult
install
to mitigate.
if it's on a slab. Yeah, there
Slabs,
was yeah. So and it can get very costly as well. That's something a seller could test for prior if you would like.
Well, there was an article in the Dispatch like a couple weeks ago about radon and what an issue it is in Ohio.
Uh-huh.
And there were a couple people they interviewed for the story who had been diagnosed with cancer, non-smokers, and were like, "How in the world did I get lung cancer?" And the doctor said, "Have you had your home tested for radon?" And their answer was, "Well, no. Like they didn't have any idea what radon even was."
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's the doctors basically said it's very hard to isolate if radon is the conclusive
Right.
cause of cancer. Like, you can't really say this was the cause. However, if you're a non-smoker, you live in a house and it's got high elevations of radon, they said it's likely that the radon could have been.
Now, with all that being said, I think the odds of that being a thing is actually like winning the lottery. So it's not, I know it's one of those terms. It's a very hot button right now. People get very scared by it.
Yes.
And tag social media, thank you for that. But so that is a personal option if you want to choose that. It is not a mandatory test. It is completely up to you. One thing though is that if your house does test positive for it, and if you're on the list side, you will have to disclose that.
Yep.
So it's kind of like the seller, no matter what, is going to have to do that installation once a house tests positive for it. And, I too, on the buy side, will ask for it to be done because at some point my buyers may sell, and that's
Right.
going to, again, be coming up as an
It's
issue
all
right
personal
now.
preference. If
It is
people-
absolutely personal preference.
Every test costs more money,
Mhm.
is what it comes down to.
Right.
So, I mean, in general, you're going to have a general home inspection, probably about between $300 and $400 for a general inspection. So
And then
they're
those are
starting
just
with
on
that.
top of
And then
that,
if you
yes.
add all of these others, each one adds a cost. So if you're going
Right.
to test for lead, you're
Right.
going to test for radon, what are some other tests?
Pest, which you have to have if
Hey,
you're getting
Dana.
a VA loan.
Yeah. So mold, we said too.
Mold.
Are there other? I mean, I think you can pretty much inspect for just about everything, can't you?
It lists out in the contract what you
What can
can
be
test for
tested,
whatever
yeah.
you want. Like, honestly, the most common though, I think, are the general, what destroying
Termites,
insects and
yeah,
pests. Which, as Amanda mentioned, if you're doing a VA loan, you're going to be required to have one, and the seller's going to have to pay for it, or the buyer can't pay for it. Someone other
Buyer
than the
can't
buyer.
pay for it. Someone's got to pay for
Yeah,
it.
someone
other
other
than the
than-
buyer.
Right.
So
If a VA loan, so if you're a veteran, and then radon. I think those are the three most common, right?
Yeah.
The ones I see.
sure, absolutely. So one of the other, I've got an article pulled up, and one of the things that brings up too is that sellers. One of the common mistakes with inspections is sellers don't prepare the home for the inspection. So inspectors have liability on them too, and I've run into inspections where they won't test the oven because sometimes people use that as storage for their pots and pans. They're not going to take those out. Or to test a sump pump in your finished basement, you've got it closed up and the wood screwed in and blocking. They can't test it. They're going to have to come back. So there are
Well,
things-
and if you have a radon system installed, they can't open the sump pump anyways because that gets all sealed.
Well, that would be
Yeah.
but if it doesn't,
Can't light pilot lights.
fireplaces, gas fireplaces. I mean,
If the
there's
electric panel's switched off, they won't flip it on. Like if
Right.
your house is vacant and for safety, you just flip
Right.
the electric off, you turn the gas off, you turn the water off.
Yeah.
But they won't turn any of that on.
yeah. So
because
then they're gonna have
there
to
may
come
be a
back.
reason, right?
They're liable if
yeah.
something happens.
So
So make sure that all of your utilities are on
and functioning and all the appliances and everything.
which
are
your
functioning.
realtor will take care of.
Yes, usually yes, yeah. But I mean, in the end, most things I don't think are something to really,
I think there are some things that are very common that come up in the inspection reports, and always what I think specifically is the grading outside.
Always.
Now I have had that always seems to come up in inspections, and then I have had buyers bring in structural engineers, not because of that, but because of other issues, and the structural engineers say absolutely you do not build up the grading. That puts more pressure on the foundation, and you just leave it as is and it's better. So again, that's something that I don't know, like.
It all goes back, I think, to the inspector's a generalist. They're not someone they're not an engineer, they're not an electrician.
They know
not
a lot
plumber.
about a little.
They know a little
about a lot of things. Yeah, they're not experts in any one thing.
Yeah.
Typically.
And so, it's common that
Right. There's issues with every house, whether you buy, a resale or if you're buying new. So,
yeah, I mean, if the house is 5 years old or it's 50 or 100, you're gonna get a report. I had a client once. The house was less than 10 years old, and she got a 30-page report, and every report is 30 pages or more. It's
Right.
like, because they're just templates and they fill in what's wrong with each
Mhm.
issue. But she was insistent that she had this 30-page report and she has to have all of these things fixed. Well, do you? I mean, and ultimately this is what happens, right? You have a number of days to inspect, then you negotiate with the seller what they're going to pay, what they're not going to pay, what they're going to fix, what they're not going to fix. So it's between the buyer and the seller. It's another round of negotiations. What's going to happen? And motivation. You're in a buyer or seller's market. Just like negotiating the price, they've probably got 3 or 4 other buyers waiting in the wings.
Who will forego some of the stuff? And
So,
Right.
They may be less willing to make a lot of the repairs that you ask for. So it's going to depend on the situation.
I think too, what sometimes it comes down to, again, like we mentioned before, is home ownership. Like there's going to be older HVAC systems. There's going to be maybe an older roof on a house. And I don't know that the inspector is pointing it out to say, you got to get this fixed by the seller right now because this is horrible.
Right.
Or at some point, this may be an issue for you, just FYI.
Right.
Unless you're buying a new build,
I've seen it in a
more
lot of,
likely than not.
in a lot of inspection reports I've seen where they list maintenance concerns, like keep an eye on it and
Right.
must be
Yeah.
fixed immediately.
Yeah.
Like where they kind of layer out
Right.
levels of importance for you. So
So you ask for the material defects
Yes.
when you're asking the seller to fix.
yeah, you
Yeah.
can't ask for, well, man, that paint's chipped, that's a bad example.
Just talking about lead paint.
I'm like, if you
I don't know.
There's a
What
hole
would
in
you-
the wall, like,
If you don't-
that the doorknob went through, and it's kind of not really causing a functional problem, a defect.
anything
it's just
that is to
cosmetic.
the function of the house. If it's
Right.
cosmetic, you
Well,
can't ask for it.
And to that point, you saw the house and wrote an offer on the house and the
Mhm.
condition it's in.
Right.
So you do have to factor that. If there is a hole in the wall, you saw that. You knew that was there when you wrote the offer.
You might
It's
not, but
Well, I mean, but no, right. If it's hidden behind some, obviously that's,
Right,
a little shady.
there's
But
going to be cosmetic issues.
there's going to be some stuff
with
with it.
houses.
And even things like the roof. I've had buyers, I've been on the sell side and get, a remedy request that, the roof needs replaced or something. And, I mean, let's be honest. I mean, the roof is highly visible unless it's covered in snow or something when you view the house. Your agent or whoever's looking at the house should be able to tell you at least, just from looking at it, whether or not that roof is on its last leg, right? You can usually tell by the markings
Not
on
really.
the...
I mean, I disagree, just because we're not inspectors,
Sure.
and I don't like to advise my client anyway
Sure.
of inspection
Sure.
issues, because I don't know. I mean, I bought a house, and I was like, we thought the roof had to be replaced, and we had somebody come look at it, and they're like, you have at least like 5
Yeah.
years left, and to me, that's long enough.
Right. But I guess my point is, when you're looking at the house, factor in, like if the roof, you'll see a
Right.
lot of roofs, nowadays most roofs are dimensional shingles,
Mhm.
right? Where it's like layered and it's not just like it looks like it's flat, it's,
Mhm.
if you see it and it's like the flat roof and it's got, it looks like the stains on it where it's
Mhm.
coming down, you can tell that it's an old roof. You
Right.
may not know that
Right.
it's on its last
Mhm.
year at that point. But you're writing an offer on a very substantial purchase. I'm not saying you have to do an inspection when you're buying the house, but I think you should at least make some general observations. And I don't think that asking for a roof and a remedy request, unless like they do a roof certification and that roof is failing and it's leaking in multiple
Mhm.
places, and then that's a major problem. I don't think asking for a new roof as part of a purchase is a legit ask unless it's already
You usually
failing.
have it, like the repair certain shingles
Right,
and
yeah.
things like that.
Well,
But
yeah.
I've had people ask for that
I
stuff.
have had people ask for that too,
And I'm like, no.
they're like, no,
You know,
not doing it.
you offered on the house.
Yeah.
You knew when you pulled up
Yeah.
that this roof looked like it did. Like, you know.
Yeah.
And you know, if there were leaks and the seller didn't
Right.
disclose, and there's a
Yeah,
whole other layer of
of
problems,
stuff
you know,
with
like,
roofing. Yeah.
But there's all kinds of things I think that are like that. You know that. You know, the HVAC system. You know, people say, well, the HVAC has to be, like you said earlier, the HVAC has to be replaced. You know, it's on its last year. No.
Tom, are you disagreeing with the roof? What is your opinion on that? That sellers should repair and replace if it's asked for? Let me know.
Yeah, there's
Come on, Tom. let
Come
us know.
on, Tom. Waiting.
Well, so anyway, so while Tom's responding,
Yes.
if he chooses to,
If he chooses to.
and it all depends on the situation, right? Again, in this market,
right.
someone's gonna probably take the house behind you again, unless it's any of those things we just talked about are absolutely failing, and you offered in the way it was. You know, I always, when I'm walking through with my buyer, I never say to anyone, that roof probably needs replaced, or, you know,
Right.
I never say it looks like it's new. I don't know. I'll say to them, that roof looks like it's older, you know, or something
Right,
like that. You
right.
know,
Like these are
So
old
point that out,
windows,
or-
but I don't,
yeah.
I'm not inspecting.
I'm not inspecting, and
If they ask questions, I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
inspector question.
Yeah. and then I always try to find, you know, if you're looking at the furnace or the heater when you're looking, I always try to find the sticker that says, you know, if they've got the permits on there when
Right.
it was installed, so at least you know the
Least
age.
last service.
You know what you're offering on. You know, I guess that's the point. Be an educated offerer. Don't just go into it blindly. That's the main
Mhm.
point. So,
Yeah.
Well,
so
do we cover everything? Any other
So,
points regarding inspection? What did we decide today? Did we decide inspections are important?
yes.
Inspections
yes,
are very, very important.
I don't know that it's as important for a seller to have it done before listing, but every buyer needs to have their inspection
I think-
and recommend going to the inspection.
On the sell side, if you're not going to do a full-fledged inspection, having a general contractor come through
Mm-hmm.
and take a just quick glance over stuff. I don't know that you need to go through a full inspection, but having someone come through to do a once over on stuff, to look for common stuff that we've, you know, kind of some of the stuff we've talked about here. Because ultimately, you know, what I'm finding in this market, a lot of people are making like hurried decisions
Really
because, you know, they have to because
So
there's
competitive.
small
There's no
offers.
time.
And so
Yeah.
people are getting to the inspection and then getting cold feet and changing their mind. So as a seller, anything you can do to alleviate those concerns that might come up, you know, on big things, I think is going to help you down the road.
Mhm.
So I don't think it's a horrible idea.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't know that you got to go through the full on inspection, but I think having it looked over by someone's not, you know, it's maybe
Not a bad
recommended.
thing. You're probably going to have
Correct.
stuff you need to
Right.
fix, so you might as well
Yeah.
be
Get it
preemptive
fixed, right.
and get it fixed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I've had a lot of people say, you know, I already, you know, and then they get their remedy request and they're like, well, I already fixed all this stuff, you know. And
Well,
like,
and then there's
and then
that.
they're
yeah.
asking for more. So
yeah,
it's
like,
like,
you
right.
gotta be kidding. So yeah.
so there's a, you know, talk to your agent. So that's
Call
what that
us.
boils down to. Yeah. And then anything else?
I don't think so. I think we've pretty
So,
much
yeah.
run the gambit on this conversation, and I think our video behind us is going to be over soon. Isn't
Yeah.
it 27 minutes? You said.
It must have started over. Or we went on to a new one.
Oh.
'cause I see
Oh,
the story.
oh, what's that guy doing? Oh,
No, I think it's the same one.
Is it?
Or maybe not, who knows. But
I can't see him. Oh, you can
Watch
actually
on
see
watch on my Facebook page.
Kind
So
of looks like Laurel and Hardy right now.
now it does, yeah. Oh.
Well, anyways, we
Anyway.
appreciate you turning.
Yeah,
tuning in.
always. Thank you, everyone.
Happy Wine Wednesday. Hope your
Cheers.
Wednesday-
Happy Wine Wednesday.
Sun's coming out tomorrow, so
Yes.
hold on for one more day. As was it Wilson
Sun will
Phillips?
come out tomorrow. Annie too.
Bye, y'all.
bye.
Bye. Let me shut you all down here.